I must apologize to the audience and to the comrades behind the platform. I will not be able to deal with all the questions which have been raised, some of which are very interesting, because I want to concentrate on what seem to me to be the two key issues as they have emerged from the debate, and the two key issues which are, after all, related to the very subject we are dealing with this evening. This is the question of the state, and this is the question of alternative strategies. Let us take for a minute at face value the remark made by Comrade Roberts. He says what the communist parties, Euro-communist parties of Western Europe want to do is basing themselves on the democratic traditions of the Western European working class and the unfolding mass struggles. I quote, redraw the whole map of the bourgeois state. And at the same time, he says, what we have to reject is any idea of frontal confrontation and any idea of dual power. Now, you cannot express better in a nutshell the dogmatic, unrealistic, utopian character of the Euro-communist strategy. I challenge them to draw me up any type of scenario and to give me any historical evidence where the extraordinary combination of these two things could take place, that you try to redraw the whole map of the bourgeois state. In other words, you try to take away from the West European bourgeoisie what it has been conquering through 1,000 years of class struggle. I repeat, 1,000 years of class struggle, and at the same time, avoid any confrontation. What are these people? Fools? You are going to fool them. You are going to fool the bourgeois of Venice. I repeat, who have 1,000 years of experience. You are little children compared with them, with your phony tricks. You think you will fool them for 1 second. You try to redraw the map of the bourgeois state, and they will remain passive. They will do nothing. They will not try to provoke a confrontation. If you only retain the workers, they will do nothing. I mean, what type of history is this? To what type of class struggle does this refer? To what type of society does this refer? Where have we ever seen anything of that? The comrade makes an extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary methodological accusation. He says that when you refer to historical lessons, you are an empiricist. That's like you would say, you try to develop scientific laws without experiments. Isn't that the very definition of dogmatism? How can you, after such a long history of class struggle in the capitalist countries, draw any conclusion, develop any perspective, make any prediction without referring to the lessons of history? And after all, I repeat, this is not the first time we have that type of debate. That type of debate has been going on in the Western European labor movement and even in some semi-colonial countries for 70 years. And isn't it based on very concrete analysis of concrete situations? Was Trotsky a dogmatist when he was developing his ideas about Bonapartism and fascism in Germany after 1929? Wasn't he concretely analyzing what was concretely developing in that country? Was he a dogmatist when he was analyzing the absolute unavoidable transformation of the situation in Spain from the Popular Front to a fascist conspiracy? What were we doing in the Fourth International when we were making a very concrete and specific analysis of the Chilean developments between 1970 and 73, not with some general abstract dogmatic references, but with concrete references to the concrete social and political forces involved in the country? And you oppose to that what? A daydream. A daydream. The capitalists are stupid, they are fools, They will let you take away one police a group after another, one regiment after another, one factory after another, one town hall after another, sleeping in the same time or taking the airplane to the Bahamas, till one day they come back and they say, oh goodness, we haven't left anything. There is no power left, and no, well, there is no other choice we have but let the Communist Party lead Britain. I mean, what kind of daydream is this? I'll just ask you one concrete question. One concrete question, which played such a tremendous role in the concrete things which were going on before every single military and fascist coup which we have known till now in the Western world, including in some semi-colonial countries. How will you start redrawing the whole map of the bourgeois state without shaking up the hierarchical structure of the army? You think you can redraw the map of the bourgeois state without touching the soldiers? You think you can do that without getting the soldiers move? And you think the officers will stay with their arms like that and say, well, there is an overwhelming force in the country, 50% of the vote in municipal elections, we can't do anything. If the soldiers want to discuss politics, let them discuss politics. I mean, is that realistic? I'll tell you what will happen. I'll tell you what will happen. But because we know what happened in Chile, I'm referring to a real tragedy. I'm not referring to some abstract dogmas. The first moment, the first group of soldiers starts to challenge the discipline of the hierarchy of the bourgeois army, that hierarchy is going to put an ultimatum to your left Labour government and is going to say, either you leave us free to put these people in jail, to torture them, because that's what they did under the Allende government in Chile. They tortured the rebellious soldiers. Their women went before the television and denounced these tortures. And the Allende government said, well, we want to avoid a confrontation. We want to avoid a confrontation, so we can't do anything. If we help the soldiers, there will be a confrontation. There will be dual power. There will be chaos. You can't help it. And they got the prize for that. They got the prize for that in September 1973. So I just ask you, how are you going to avoid a confrontation if you take away from the capitalists the holiest of holy? I just gave the example of the army, in order not to be accused of being an economist who wants to oppose the economic from the political or the, let us say, military field. But let's look at the economy. It's absolutely the same. What are the main props of the capitalist? You said challenge the capitalist model of accumulation, whatever that means. Let's not go into the details, because that's the Italian way of hiding reality behind verbiage. But let's do away with it. Let's talk about real concrete things. Okay, I'll just ask you one concrete question. Are you going to avoid a confrontation? If bank employees take it into their foolish heads, into their insolent heads, at a certain moment of class struggle, of mass, and we have seen that half a dozen times in the last 20 years, if bank employees take it into their insolent heads to follow instructions of strike committees, of unions, in the question of whom they are going to distribute money to and whom not. You know, in Britain, with all its with all its reformist, social democratic and so on tradition, we had, and we still have, around the Grunwick business, an extraordinary example, practical example, how a trend towards dual power arises out of banal incidents of the daily class struggle. What the postal workers have been doing with Grunwick, what other sectors of the public employees project to do with Grunwick, is, from the bourgeois point of view, chaos. Imagine a small minority, some thousands of postal workers, take it upon themselves to rule against the law, and, goodness, against Parliament, against the vote of Parliament. They will determine who gets post and who does not get post. Goodness, well, that's what revolutions is all about, you know. That's what revolutions is, that's what a social revolution is all about. But how? how can you redraw the map of the bourgeois state without this type of things happening all the time? Isn't that a lesson of the whole history of the 20th century? So you can't have it both ways. And especially Comrade Campbell, I'm a bit astonished. I mean, I will not go into the demagogic aspect of her intervention, but to counterpose of all tendencies to the Trotskyists, the idea of autonomous developments of mass movements, not only of industrial workers. We have never said anything of that type, of any sector of the oppressed and the exploited, while the whole strategy based on parliament and representative bodies of the bourgeois state has exactly that implication. In Italy, where you have a rather strange constitution, which reflects in its positive and its negative sides very specific and special circumstances and relationship of forces as existed in 1945, and just in passing, I will shock and provoke some comments, even in Germany the same thing is true, because the German constitution is a very peculiar constitution, which was written at a time when the political power of the German bourgeois class was extremely weak. And that's why it is a strange constitution. One should look and read upon it. It's very different from the constitution of France, of the Fifth Republic, obviously. The Italian constitution has a rather democratic part, which I personally approve very much of, and I would like to see extended, inclusive to Britain. This is the right of referendum. Now, what does the Italian Communist Party say, who is for the democratization of the political institutions, for the spread of political initiative of the masses throughout society? It is trying to do away with this right of referendum, do away with this small element of direct democracy, and with what argumentation? The argumentation is very straightforward and very honest, because it tends to develop an opposition between the citizens and the elected assemblies. Now, my contention is that you cannot have any rise of massive class struggle in Western Europe without an increasing opposition between the mass of the citizens and the elected assemblies, be it only because of the conservative character of these elected assemblies, which reflect in the best of cases what were the relationship of forces 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago, and which cannot reflect what's going on every day in the changes of this relationship of forces once you have huge mass movements. So you are in a completely contradictory and completely self-defeating position. And your choice in practice, as has been the choice of all right, left, centrist social democrats, will be a choice of camps. Because that's what it will be, dear comrade. If our analysis of the European trend towards revolution, objective development of the class struggle towards revolution in at least 4, 5, 6 European countries, I don't say in all, in a foreseeable future, is correct, you'll have to have a very grave choice, a very agonizing choice. What will you do when there will be that conflict? When there will be that conflict between millions of citizens and the elected representatives of the people? On whose side will you be? Will you be on the side of the anarcho-populists? The anarcho-populists in Spain, who were millions in July 1936. The anarcho-populists in Portugal, which were perhaps not millions, but certainly hundreds of thousands during the final high moment of the revolutionary uprising in Portugal in 1975. Or will you be not only on the side of the elected representatives of the people, because unfortunately that ideal or idyllic way of seeing things is not going to take place. Will you be on the side of the cops? Will you be on the side of those who will try to crush this anarcho-populism because they want to avoid a confrontation at all costs? Your policy is precipitating the confrontation. It makes the confrontation unavoidable. It is much more dogmatic and much more unrealistic than anything which revolutionary Marxists can project. Now I conclude on the alternative strategy. I think our alternative strategy is rather coherent. We say we try to develop the independent class action, the independent mass activity of all sectors of the exploited and the oppressed, which are in their majority, their great majority, in the industrialized advanced countries, workers, industrial workers and unproductive workers, but workers, wage earners, which represent between 75 and 90% of the active population. And we include in that, of course, women, and we include in that, of course, students, and we include in that, of course, oppressed nationalities and all oppressed sectors of society. We have no narrow industrial workers' view of what human liberation or human emancipation must be. We say independent mass mobilizations, independent class struggle, education in an anti-capitalist way, starting from the most modest and most immediate struggles, always have that purpose in mind. Develop amongst the workers an alternative model of society, an alternative model of political power. And we don't say only on economic fields. When we fight for workers' control, when we fight for nationalization under workers' control, when we fight for a radical reduction of the work week, we don't stop to that. We fight also for a workers' plan for full employment. We fight also for a workers' government. We will fight also for political power to the working class, and we do not stop at economic level. And we say, when these three trends, the trend towards growing independent mass action of the working class, the trend towards growing radicalization of mass struggles, and the trend towards growing self-organization of the working class dovetail with conditions, I don't say of an economic crisis of overproduction, that's a schematic and foolish way of putting the thing, dovetails with an overall social crisis of the bourgeois order, which is something entirely different and much broader than the likelihood that you will have a revolutionary crisis, and that out of that revolutionary crisis will come out a dual power situation. That likelihood is rather great on the basis of historical evidence. And when you speak about actual change and actual influence, well, I don't want to speak about the Trotskyist organization, Thought International alone. I want to speak about a broader layer of, let us say, the mass vanguard in Western Europe. But I'll just quote you two facts which you cannot deny, and which are facts of tremendous objective importance today in Western Europe, and which are, for us, harbingers of things to come. When in Italy, elected delegates in general assemblies in factories arose in 1969 in nearly all the big shops of the Italian industry and are still there today, they did not arise as the result of any preparation, any propaganda, any organizational step of the Italian Communist Party. On the contrary, they arose against the resistance of the Italian Communist Party, but they are there today, and they represent millions of workers. Communist Party tries to co-opt them in their trade union apparatus, okay, c'est bonne guerre, as we say in French, but they are there, and you will not have them out of the way before there will be a crushing defeat of the Italian working class, and I hope to see that that will not happen. And today in Spain, exactly the same thing is occurring on an even broader scale. In these weeks, in every single Spanish factory, elected delegates are going to come about and are going to constitute councils and are going to take into their hands working class unity organized at factory level. And it's not thanks to the Spanish Communist Party that they come about, I can tell you. It's not the initiative of the Spanish Communist Party which has created that situation. It has resisted that situation, even in a desperate way, and it will try to co-opt afterwards. That's very good. I prefer an attempt at co-optation as an attempt at repression. Still, these two facts, which are tremendous facts, and which represent changes which have occurred amongst millions of Western European workers, should make you think about the realism of the counter-strategy which we develop to the strategy of Eurocommunism, and should make you think about the possibility, the probability, and the advisability of a situation of dual power, which will be one of the ways in which what you want, or what you say what you want, can be achieved, is to say to reduce to the extreme the human costs of a revolution in Western Europe, because that you will only be able to do if you will channel, if you will unify, if you will really harness that tremendous strength of directly acting tens of millions of Western European workers.